Hello everybody, my name is Naya and I'm the Black Female Engineer, and today we are going to be talking about the fastest, quickest, easiest way to become a software engineer in 2021. Now, I'm sure if any of y'all have looked outside, some ish went down between January 2020 to March 2020. Because of this and because of this sudden influx of jobs and companies moving to online, a lot of demand has shown up for software engineers and web developers to be able to assist in the migration of companies from in person to online, and not even in the migration, but also being able to build upon the current systems in place, because now it's one thing having, let's say, 10 people using your platform, but now having 1,000 people using your platform because they have no other choice. Now when we think about even smaller mom and pop shops, let's say food trucks and coffee shops and things like that, all of these different places have now needed to find a way to gain an online presence, gain an online branding in order to sustain their business, because again, we're all up in this house. And so now companies, large and small, needing to find a way to sustain their online presence and being now much more willing to hire web developers than they may have been in the past, because maybe they thought it was unnecessary and all that. So let's get into it. So the first thing you want to do to become a software engineer in the quickest time possible is learn the bare bones of the structure you will be building. And what is that? That is HTML and CSS. HTML standing for Hypertext Markup Language, CSS standing for Cascading Style Sheets. These two things come together to create really a basic site, with HTML being really the text that you see on the site. So when you see a header on a site, when you see a title, when you see paragraphs or quotes or links, that's HTML. Now, when you see that the page isn't just a white page background with this black text on top of it as a title, as paragraph, as links, that is because they're using CSS. CSS is responsible for the styling of things. And to be honest, people like to sleep on CSS. People like to very quickly just breeze by it, thinking that it's not going to make a difference, or it's not as important as, JavaScript and Ruby and React and all of this stuff. But y'all, it really is, because you know what? When you submit your portfolio for a company, when you are now building that app, building that website, what's going to make it look pretty? CSS, y'all. When was the last time you went to a site and you decided, like, oh no, I'm getting out of here because it looked all kinds of messed up? Yeah, that's CSS, y'all. So you want to make sure you really put in the practice with that, to really make sure that at the end of it all, what you have spent so much time building looks nice and pretty and sleek and clean, and all of these things that make audiences and consumers and customers gravitate to that site, to that app, to that business. So do not sleep on that, y'all. Like, seriously, spend hours, days, weeks really honing in on CSS, because that's another thing. It is so hard to pick on CSS than the other languages and frameworks, because the other languages and frameworks have like a clear right and wrong. CSS, y'all, once you do one thing, you think you're changing the background color, but then you're changing just this little box in the corner, and then you think you're changing the font size only to this, and it goes haywire. So being able to really hone down and continue practicing CSS is so necessary. When it comes to HTML, y'all, is quite straightforward. It is quite straightforward. It took me a night, if that, to really learn HTML, because it comes with its own very clear set of rules. If you want a title, make sure it's marked with this. If you want a paragraph, make sure it's marked with this. And there you go on your way, and we're good. And also, it's very Googleable, and so you can definitely get away with knowing less HTML, because if you need to, create a chart within your site, Now you can just Google how to create a chart in HTML and boom, there it is. But first step, you need to know the bones of this structure, bones of this house. You need to be able to build a real nice structure, and that is with HTML and CSS. So now you know HTML and CSS, and so now you can create static websites for people, for friends, family. When I say static website, that is typically just a landing page. You go Google, I don't even know, pets.com, and you just see a website with just a bunch of pets pictures, some names of the pets, and all of this, and that's it. There's no, adoption type service. There's no, buying things for your pet at home or anything. There's no service being produced or accessed or anything like that. It is what you see is what you get. You go on, go off. And so now you are able to build a static site. And so if you can take about a day or two after practicing HTML and CSS in particular, start building some static sites. Think about your hobbies, think about things that interest you, and create a site for it. Just, one page, try to make it have a banner, try to make it have different images and, different borders and things like that. And just try to make it as pretty as possible. And if you can do that, you're in a very, very good spot. So just get that practice in. Don't just rush and learn and then go on your day. You need to make sure you get your practice in with actual projects, because that is how you test your abilities. And that's how you will be able to become a software engineer in the quickest time possible. So the next thing you need to do, this is number 3. You want to learn JavaScript. So when it comes to web development, the 3 things you will really, really hear most talked about are HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Now, I like to use this, other, simile of, where HTML is the person you're dating, CSS is the way they look, and JavaScript is the way they act, the way they treat you. Put all these things together and you have your perfect or not so perfect person. So with these 3 things together, you have really a lot under your belt as to web development, especially front-end software engineering, front-end web development. Because now you're able to create the content of a site. You're also able with CSS to style it, and with JavaScript, that's what creates the actions. And so being able to say, when I click here, it's going to do this, and when I swipe here, it's going to go here, and this is going to change, and this is going to change. JavaScript is how things change within the app you're creating. So it is very, very important, and it is what differentiates between just a site and an app. An app, it has functionalities, it has resources, it has services it can provide, it has, actions. A site is just chilling there, just, there it is. What you see, like I said, is what you get. But then adding that action, adding that functionality, that is when you can now actually do something with your app, whether it be an e-commerce site, whether it be a social app, all this stuff. That is where that magic happens. So the next thing you need to do to become a software engineer in the quickest, just rapid fire way possible is learn a back-end technology. So you just heard me talk about front end just now. So front end and back end, these 2 things together is what creates an app. And so front end is what you see. It's what you can actually trace and being able to say, okay, this did this, and when I clicked here, it did this, and these colors are this, and these words are here. That's front end. That is what the user actually interacts with. Back end, it allows for content to be fed to the front end. And so back end, when you hear front end and back end engineers, one way back end works is to provide basically storage for data. And so if you want your app or site to be able to say, when I click here, I want to be able to see all of the cities with the name that starts with the name B. And so all you have to do is click the button B cities, and there it pops up. Well, it pops up because of what was stored in the back end. So these 2 things communicate to each other to ultimately provide a service or a result to the user. And so I highly recommend learning Ruby as your first back-end technology. Ruby is extremely easy to read. It was made with the thought of simplicity while also being highly productive, specifically when joined with Ruby on Rails. What's Ruby on Rails? Ruby on Rails is a library or a framework built upon Ruby to really allow developers to build apps in the easiest way possible, being able to provide ideally everything the developer would need to provide the app with everything they want, really. Like Ruby on Rails, it's extremely daunting at first. If you just look up Ruby on Rails and you see all the files and all the folders and files within folders and folders within files, can be so daunting to look at. But when you start seeing how things connect and why this folder exists and this file exists and what goes where, it becomes so much more manageable and it becomes such a smaller world and less of this big daunting place. So I highly recommend learning Ruby and then Ruby on Rails. Learn Ruby first, y'all. Like, you're not going to be a successful software engineer by skipping steps. So it's very important to learn the basics or the vanilla. Okay, it's like this. Y'all learned long division before being handed a calculator, correct? It's the exact same thing here, because now, even though you have the calculator, you know what the calculator is doing. You know what the process of dividing is. If you just start with Ruby on Rails, it'll be, I'd say, very difficult in the future for you. Now maybe you are able to make an app, but you don't really understand how. You understand how to, you were able to do it because you followed a tutorial or you followed some, Udemy course or this, that, or the other. But you don't really know why it worked. And it's so important to know why it worked, because when you become an engineer and your boss says, hey, do this, this, you need to know why things work to know the best approach to solve a certain problem. You need to know how things connect with each other, how things go from here to here, for you to be able to go into a certain program, go into a certain project, and fulfill that task for your boss. So please start with Ruby first, just Ruby itself, the language, before going on to that Udemy course and following along this Ruby on Rails tutorial. And I say that because, y'all, the amount of Udemy courses I bought, I want to say I bought 6 of them. And sure, I was able to build things and it was cool once I did, but y'all, I didn't know the biggest clue about why this worked. And if you asked me to do it by myself, I may have been able to do it because I memorized the steps, but I don't know why I did those steps, because I wasn't learning for myself. I was just following along. And so please learn Ruby first, learn how the language is structured. Again, it's very easy, very readable, and then go on to Ruby on Rails. So now with these things, HTML and CSS, JavaScript, and Ruby on Rails, you now have every single thing you need to create a full stack web application. This is major. This is truly major, because you can now actually, with just these things, create an actual social media app. You do. Now it's a matter of how do we translate these quote unquote more basic skills into hireable skills. One way, and one very important way, is to now learn front-end frameworks. So Ruby on Rails was a back-end framework. Now let's learn front-end frameworks, because while JavaScript is very important for the front end, people aren't using JavaScript. And now when I say JavaScript, I mean vanilla JavaScript, which is the term of, the long division type of JavaScript. People aren't using long I was gonna say people aren't using long division. They're not. But people aren't using vanilla JavaScript to create their apps. They're not. Because we have front-end frameworks to allow us to do things quicker and provide us with the necessary tools and functionalities to create these nice, big, sleek, functional apps in a much less time. And so learn a front end framework. I highly recommend React or Angular or Vue. These are all frameworks based on JavaScript. And so now you've learned JavaScript, so now let's make sure that your frameworks very much, correlate with JavaScript. So, because again, we're trying to do this. We're not wasting any time. Like, we got to be quick here. We're trying to get that bag. We're in a panoramic, like, we need money now. And so these three frameworks are very, very highly utilized within companies, within startups, within large tech firms. They are very, very highly utilized. And so you want to be able to build with these frameworks to now be able to put on your resume like, look, you use React? Great. So do I. So you want to be able to say that. And again, don't be daunted when I say things like frameworks and, dictionaries and libraries and functionalities, like all that. All I'm saying is get a calculator in your hand and now just learn how to use it. And it's going to take, a little bit of time to use this calculator, but now everything you do is going to be so much faster, so much high tech, and so much more transferable to other companies when you're trying to get a job. So please, I know it's a lot of just spillage on all of you, but please breathe. That's all I'm just saying, grab a calculator. So now that you have learned HTML and CSS, JavaScript, a back-end technology, hopefully Ruby and Ruby on Rails, and now you have learned a front-end framework, let's say React and Vue or Angular. Now go to your friends, go to your family, try to find someone with a hobby they're very much into, or a business that they just started, or they've been doing for a while. Try to find a friend or family member who has either a business of their own or a hobby that can very much be shown online. A hobby, let's say your friend is an artist, and so go to them and say, hey, I noticed you're a very talented artist, and I bet you've thought about selling your products. Let me create a site for you. Let me create a web app for you, an app in general. Let me create something for you, and I want you to be able to use it. This is a great way to get your practice in, one, and also add things to your resume. Because now what's going to happen, get a pen and paper because I'm very serious about this. You go to your friend, ask them to build a site or an app for them. They say yes. Now you too need to sit down and you need to hear and take notes on every single thing that they want their site or app to encompass. What color schemes do they want? What kind of feel do they want? Do they want it to be sleek and clean and uncluttered, or do they want it to be like really in your face, really busy and fun and all of this? What vibe are they looking for? What's their target customer, their target market? Because that also affects color schemes and fonts and all of this and everything. Then ask for deadlines. Then when you go back to your own house, your own office, your own bedroom, draw some markups for them and go back to them and say, here, after these conversations we had, I drew up 3 to 4 designs for how your app will look like. Which one do you like more? These designs will have let's say the layout with, if we want a navigation up here, and then we want, the columns down here, and then a chart here, and things like that. Just draw 4 different iterations of that. Then when they pick one, go back and start building the app for them. Keep them updated and make sure you are following the deadlines that they set. This is amazing practice for when you get a job, because that is what a job is. A company expects you to be able to take their vision and produce it. They want somebody who can take an idea and turn it into something real, something tangible, something they can actually see. And so by doing this and practicing this with your friends and family, people who will not, fire you, or maybe fire you but still keep you on as a friend / daughter or son. Like, now you are able to get practice in not only developing, but also get practice in following I want to say direction, but I don't want it to sound as if it's like following orders. More of a thing of like being able to take someone's vision and put it to actuality, because that's something that's very difficult, because we are people who have our own styles, our own way of doing things. And so being able to actually take something that somebody wants, despite our own opinions or views or anything, and still produce something that both of us are proud of, that takes tremendous patience and skill and discipline. And so you want to practice this as much as possible. And if they end up using what you created for them, if your friend, if your mother, if your brother end up using this, or even better yet, paying you for it, now you can put it on your resume as experience, because you know what? You were just a freelance developer for them and for their company and for their business, which is huge. And companies don't take that lightly. It is so, so important. I got hired just off projects. I didn't even have, experience to say, oh no, a company hired me to do this and I did it. So now imagine if you can put that on your resume and talk about it during your interviews. That will be huge. So there you have it, everybody. The quickest way to become a software engineer in 2021. Do these things and really, really devote time to it, and you can become a software engineer in 6 months or less. And it takes discipline. It does. It takes being able to draw boundaries with your family and friends, and being able to have actual like working hours dedicated to your school, dedicated to your self-teaching journey, and really, really come out of this the other side with something you're proud of, a job, your own business, your own company, anything like that. So it takes discipline, but if you do have that discipline, you can do this. By the summer, y'all, you can be a software engineer. So thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe below and like and comment and let me know what other videos you'd like to see from me. But for now, I'll see y'all later. Bye.